Good to see you in the assembly of the Lord with us today. We're glad you are here. Let's worship in our blue hymnals. Turn to hymn 517, singing, I Will Sing of My Redeemer, hymn 517. I will sing of my Redeemer and his wondrous love to me. On the cruel cross he suffered, from the curse to set me free. Sing, oh sing of my Redeemer, with his blood he purchased me. Turn now to hymn 624, His Eye is on the Sparrow, hymn 624.
Why should my heart
Turn out your blue folders to All Praise to Him. All praise to Him in your blue folders. All praise to Him, the God of light, who formed the mountains by
Good morning, y'all. If you would, take your Bibles and turn to Psalm 139. Our text is going to be Psalm 139, the entire psalm. I just about can't bring myself to preach a tiny bit of a psalm. But we're going to read this entire psalm once. I want you to have your Bibles open because I'm going to be drawing your attention back to the text, but many times I'll read the text and then we'll continue to reread the text as we go through it, and I just don't know that we'll have time for that this morning. So we'll read it once and then I'll draw your attention to different portions of it. Psalm 139 is for the chief musician, a psalm of David. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost part of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness will fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day, and the darkness and the light are both alike to you. For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they are all were written, the days fashioned for me when as yet there were none of them. How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they would be more in number than the sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, you bloodthirsty men. For they speak against you wickedly. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate them, O Lord, who hate you? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. There's a lot of us today who suffer from a malady that I think could be called compartmentalized Christianity. Compartmentalized Christianity is, it takes being a Christian and turns it into something you do rather than something that you are. Or in other words, being a Christian is what someone does when they do Christian-y things. It's when we go to church or when we sing songs or when we bow our heads in prayer. But it doesn't have an impact when we're not doing Christian-y things. We don't have to worry about it when we are in the business world or the political spectrum or in family life or at the schoolhouse or on social media or when you're huddled together with friends. In truth, a Christian is at every moment of their life united by faith to God the Father through faith in Jesus Christ the Son. many of us behave as if our life was a house and Christianity is just a room in that house we go into every once in a while. We feel like some prayer or some praise will do us good, but if your life really was a house, then Christ is the foundation on which that entire house is built. A Christian is either a Christian at every moment of their life, or they're not a Christian at all. I'm going to say that again, and I'm going to attempt to explain it. A Christian is either a Christian at every moment of your life, or you're not a Christian at all. A Christian is either a Christian everywhere, or he's not a Christian anywhere. The reason that is true is not so much because of, well, this is how we express our faith at every moment, because the reality is we're all faulty. We all fall short. We will all have problems living every moment for the glory of God. We know that we will fail. That's not why we're always Christian everywhere we go. The reason a Christian has to be a Christian everywhere is because we are united in faith to the God who it is his very nature to be everywhere. We're united in faith to this God who is everywhere. You might be content with compartmentalizing your Christianity, but listen, God is not content with that. God is not going to stay caged in whatever little box and compartment of your life that you want to put him in. Our text this morning, Psalm 139, is this stunning description of God's intimate involvement in every compartment of our life from start to finish. The psalmist defines God's attributes of omniscience and omnipresence and his omnipotence, or in other words, God knows everything, God is everywhere, and God can do anything. The psalmist doesn't just define those from a theological textbook. He asserts these as truths based on what it means for his own life. David's going to say, God knows everything about me. He'll say, look, there's nowhere I can go that I can hide from him. And ultimately, he'll find comfort in that comprehensive, all-encompassing relationship with God. Now, before we jump into the psalm, just a few words about the structure, because it is a beautiful psalm that's beautifully written. The superscription above verse 1 tells us it is a psalm of David to be delivered to the chief musician. So this is a song that was written and given to the choir master in order to be sung at the temple. In other words, this was written by David, but David wrote it to relate to everyone, so it could be sang and used as praise publicly. And this psalm isn't just worded beautifully, it has this well-defined structure. In our English translations, it's broken up into 24 verses, but the original text would have better been seen in 4 strophes, or more likely we would call them stanzas today. There's 4 stanzas to this psalm. This is a side note. I like to imagine David's reaction when he comes to the temple one day and the choir director stands up and says, we're going to sing this, but we're going to sing the first, second, and last, and we're going to skip the third. Like, when the guy who wrote it is standing there, you don't do that. So we're going to take a quick walk through this psalm this morning. Each of those 4 stanzas is perfectly balanced. It's 6 verses each. So this morning we'll see that David is saying in verses 1 through 6, God knows everything. In verses 7 through 12, God is everywhere. In verses 13 through 18, God can do anything. And in verses 19 through 24, God will deal with everybody. First, God knows everything. In verses 1 through 6, when we say God knows everything, we're speaking about the omniscience of God. Nothing ever takes God by surprise. But again, the psalmist isn't teaching this like it comes out of a theological textbook. He's using this based on his personal experience. Verse 1, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. This is a personal experience. David says that God has searched him. The word for search there means looking for something, but specifically, this is a word about exploration. So this is a word, search, that gets used for workers who are digging in a mine for ore. It's used for scribes who dig into the word and study the law. It's a word that's used when the spies were sent out in order to explore the land. David is saying God knows everything there is to know. There's not some nugget of your compartmentalized life that has been hidden from him. He knows you better than the scribes know the law. He's explored every inch of your life, and whatever path is you think you have hidden from him, his footprints are already all over it. What specifically does God know about you? Well, in verse 2, God knows your thoughts. God knows you're sitting down and you're rising up. Listen, if you're in the habit of prayer before you fall asleep at night, or you pray the next morning when you wake up, you'll know that there are times when you forget, with times when you're too busy, you get too tired. You might go to bed or wake up without having God in your thoughts, but hear me, in your entire life, there has not been once that you have gone to sleep or woke up in the morning when you were not in God's thoughts. He knows everything. He knows your thoughts. God's knowledge of you goes beyond what he just sees about you. He also understands what he sees. In verse 1, God has done this thorough exploration of your life so that David concludes, well, he has known me. But at the end of verse 2, it goes a step further and says, you understand my thought afar off. So God sees everything in your life, and he knows the implications of everything that he sees, even to the point of understanding your thoughts. In years past, when our daughters were younger, they would sometimes ask before a meal, would it be okay if I pray in my mind? And what they mean by that is they just want permission in order to bow their head and silently pray instead of what they felt was the awkwardness of speaking out loud to God. Well, of course, you can pray in your mind. The reason you can pray in your mind is because God knows your thoughts when you pray. But we have to realize there is not some switch that you flip when you bow your head and close your eyes that somehow that turns the Wi-Fi on and now God's connected. You don't get to turn that off again when you're done. Even when you're not praying, God knows your thoughts. In verse 3, God knows your ways. Some of y'all remember when cereal boxes would come and they would have prizes in the bottom of them somewhere. I know I wasn't the only person who would open a brand new box of cereal and go through the whole thing looking for the prize. That's sort of the description of verse 3. It says, you comprehend my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. The word comprehend there is really the Hebrew word for scrutinize, but the word originally described the act of winnowing after harvest. You took the grain after harvest and you would shake it, you would use the wind in order to blow away the chaff until only the good stuff is what was left. David's using that word as it came to mean to sift through, to scrutinize. God has led this exploration of your life. He has scrutinized your path, your public daytime life. David says he's scrutinized my laying down. That's your private nighttime life. He's sifted through your thoughts. He knows everything about you. He has omniscient. God knows your thoughts. He knows your ways. In verse 4, He knows your words. For there's not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You know how we'd say that today? God knows me so well. He knows what I'm going to say before I say it. This omniscience of God is inescapable. There's nothing you can hide from Him. There is no hidden room in your compartmentalized life that God hasn't already just thrown the doors open wide and invited Himself inside because He belongs there. David even says, not only has God sifted through everything inside your life, he says that God's got you surrounded in verse 5. You have hedged me about behind and before. The word hedged there is the Hebrew word for surround. It was used in the military sometime for laying siege or to completely encircle. God's done this exploration and sifting of your life, but He's also got you surrounded. He has encircled you from every side. And yet, using this military term of God having you surrounded, this is not the threat of an attack on your life, because look what He says in verse 5. You've hedged me behind and before and laid your hand upon me. What does it mean, like in verse 5, to have God's hand upon you? Well, it's a good thing for a believer. You hear us pray sometimes if someone's sick or if someone's traveling or if someone's experiencing trials, we'll get sanctified and say, "Oh Lord, please have your hand over them to protect them." That's what this verse 5 is talking about. He's put His hand over me. You've got me surrounded. You've cupped your hand over me to protect me. And for all of this omniscience, all of this knowledge, there is this promise of protection. And if you're protected in this cupped hand of the omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent God, you are as secure gets. Wasn't that Jesus' promise in John chapter 10? My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. Now, in that know them, you hear this omniscience, just like in this psalm. And Jesus says, nobody's going to take them from my hand. My Father, who's greater than all, nobody's going to take them from my Father's hand. I and my Father are one. Through faith in Jesus, you can be confident you are united with the God who knows everything about you and fully inhabits every portion of your life. The problem is, when I realize that God fully inhabits every compartment of my life, I think about the fact that I know what I'm keeping in some of those compartments in my life. And the fact that God knows it too presents us with this confounding truth. Why would a God who knows me so well still love me so much? It is a staggering quandary. And David says in verse 6, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is too high. I cannot attain it. Like, I do not have a compartment I can put that in. It's too wonderful to grasp. How can it be that the one who knows me best loves me most? Because God has explored our life. He has sifted through every thought and still surrounded us with His love. Because God is omniscient, because He knows everything. That means He knows everything you are, everything you do, everything you think, everywhere you'll go, everything you'll say. He knows everything we need. So in verse 1 through 6, David is coming to grips with the reality of the God who knows everything. In verses 7 through 12, this God is everywhere. David begins verse 7 with two rhetorical questions. The answer so obvious, he doesn't bother to give them. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? Both questions are essentially asking, How can you get away from God? The obvious answer is you can't. Since God is omnipresent, since God is everywhere, at the beginning of verse 8, if you ascend into heaven, you will find God there. He is on the throne. He is doing whatever He pleases. At the end of verse 8, if you make your bed in hell, behold, you are there. The word hell there is actually the Hebrew word Sheol. It simply describes the abode of the dead, the afterlife, right? God is the ruler of eternity. Verse 9, the wings of the morning is a poetic description of the movement of the rays of the sun at sunrise. David is saying, look, if I could rise with the sun and move with the speed of light, I still am not going to escape God. Even if I went to the end of verse 9 all the way to the depths of the sea, we could go and we could hang out 7 miles down in the Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean. God is still there. Now, I do think David is drawing some directional clues for us. Which direction does the sunrise come from? Well, it comes from the east. Well, David lives in Israel. Which direction is he speaking of the sea? He's probably speaking of the Mediterranean Sea. Which direction is the sea? Well, it's to the west. So the idea of verses 8 and 9 is, look, I could go up into heaven, I could go down to the grave, I could go as far as the sun rises in the east, I could go to the west into the sea. I cannot escape the omnipresence of God. And yet, why would you want to escape Him? Because remember up in verse 5, the omniscience of God, He knows everything. David describes it as like a protective hand over your life. Well, the same thing is true about the omnipresence of God, that God is everywhere, is also protective. In verse 10, even there your hand shall lead me, your right hand shall hold me. Verse 10 is a callback to verse 5, because God knows everything. He's got you surrounded, and His hand is on you to provide your every need. In verse 10, because God is everywhere, wherever you find yourself, His hand is holding you and providing you with everything you need. His goodness is inescapable. But then David gets really clever in verses 11 and 12. Well, maybe I can't get away from God. Maybe I'm always going to know that He's there. But what if we turn out the lights? I mean, I'll know that God's there, but if I turn out the lights and I'm really quiet, maybe He won't know that I'm there. Well, verse 11 says, surely the darkness shall fall on me. How is that going to work? Well, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. Darkness and light are both alike to you. Turning out the light does not make God disappear. You can't find a place to hide from God, and you cannot find some shadow to obscure yourself from His gaze. God can see in the dark. This is good news, because this means in the darkest moments of your life, when you are utterly blind to the direction you need to go and the path you need to take, God, who has His hand over you to protect you and to lead you and guide you, still sees your path with perfect clarity. I think David here has invented the world's first night vision goggles. God's sovereignty allows him to see in the darkest of nights. His word is a lamp to our feet, a light to our path. So David, we saw him humbled in the first stanza with the omniscience of God, that God knows everything. In the second stanza with the omnipresence of God, that God is everywhere. Now he's going to kneel before the omnipotence of God, the God who can do anything. In order to prove that God can do anything, in verses 13 through 18, David offers a description of God's work as creator. but it is done in such an unusual and personal way. In verse 13, you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. The word for formed there is interesting. It comes from the Hebrew word that means to acquire or to possess or to own. But it came to mean the idea of owning something, and because you own it, you can do with it whatever you want. So think of it this way. You have the potter who owns the clay, and because he owns the clay, he can form it whatever way that he wants. This is what David is saying about God. God has formed our inward parts. He owns us and works us the way he intends to, the way he wants to, according to his will. So that every molecule that makes you was created by God. It's owned by God. It was used by God. He formed you like a potter forming clay in its finest detail. The word for inward parts here is maybe oddly to us. It's the Hebrew word for kidneys. You made my kidneys. Listen, you have to just understand the cultural context here. This Hebrew word was used to describe the deepest emotional being of a person. The Old Testament, many times, the kidneys were considered to be the seats of human emotion and moral character. In the New Testament times, that changes to bowels, to guts, right? So Paul writes to the Colossians about having bowels of mercies and says, essentially merciful emotions from your deepest being. We read that and go, well, how stupid are these people? Don't they know that emotions come from your heart? Well, yeah, do they? Do they really? Do emotions come from the kidneys or the bowels or the heart? Emotions are unseen. The reason that the human description of their source shifts is because emotions are unseen things. We don't know how to explain it, but here's how David explains it. Emotions don't come from your kidneys. They don't come from your heart. They don't come from your bowels. Your emotions come from God. He formed them. Listen, David is saying God in his omnipotence created the innermost parts of you, the very deepest core of your being that many times we struggle in vain to understand. God knows it because God made it. He's the master creator. David says, you've covered me in my mother's womb. The word for covered there is a word for weaving or shaping. You've knit me together, creating me in my mother's womb. And this is cause for nothing but praise in verse 14. I will praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. Listen, you are made according to God's grand design. You are not a mistake. Your skin tone, your hair color, your gender, your personality, your sense of humor, some of y'all, your lack of sense of humor, everything that makes you to be uniquely you was done with a sense of purpose. God made you that way for his glory. And so in a related truth, when God calls you to his service, he has not made a mistake when he called you and commands you to serve him. You remember back in Exodus, he called Moses, and Moses' his immediate complaint was, you can't have me do this. I can't talk so good. And God's answer was, hey, I made that mouth. I'm going to use it the way I intend to use it. He makes us for his glory. He calls us for his purpose. He providentially provides us everything we need in order to serve him. And it's important for us to keep that in mind, that this omniscient and omnipresent and omnipotent God that made us for his glory. He made us in order to glorify and serve him. We cannot just say, God made my personality this way, so I can act however I want. We can't say, God made my emotions this way, so I don't need to regulate them. That would make no more sense than saying, God made this body of mine to work the way it does, so I get to use it however I want. No, the God who made your mind, body, and spirit insists on love from you with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength. He made the totality of your being and demands that the totality of your being come into submission to his glory. And this is a fair demand, since he was making you when nobody else saw you, when you weren't even you yet. Look at verse 15. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest part of the earth. Yeah, there's a Mother's Day text, right? The lowest part of the earth, right? This is a poetic equivalent. In verse 15, the lowest part of the earth is a poetic equivalent to my mother's womb in verse 13. It is a secret place. It is a place that is unseen to us, but God sees and God is at work. Look what happens in that secret place. He says, my frame, literally my bones, were not hidden from God. They were being made secretly. They were being skillfully wrought, masterfully woven. The idea is that a child was being formed. God is the master craftsman who is making a frame of bones, and then on that frame, knitting all of the fine details of flesh and sinews and tendons onto and into the framework, skillfully weaving a body in order to carry the life that he has already created. And so when a mother gives birth, it seems to us like, oh, there is this new thing that has come into the world, and we're blessed to start getting to know that child. But in reality, birth is the unveiling of the masterpiece that God has been working on for 9 months. By the way, this is only one of the many reasons in Scripture that abortion is an appalling sin. God made that life in the womb. He knows it. He formed it. He's the skillful weaver, the expert architect. He's the master designer of that life in the womb. Abortion is not just a convenient disposal of some unwanted tissue. It is destroying the living child that is being crafted by God, crafted in bones and in sinews and woven together and emotions placed into it. All of this is in David's description. David continues with this description of God's omnipotence in creating life in verse 16. Everything that makes me to be me, every bit of substance, even though it was imperfect or incomplete, it's not totally formed, God's eyes saw it. The word for substance in Hebrew here is a word that describes formlessness. God takes this formlessness and is crafting it. You are not made by some haphazard accident. It is not as if God had a bunch of body parts in the corner and just reached in and felt around and grabbed whatever his hand happened to go on and started slapping them all together without thought. He wasn't just, assembling a bunch of spare parts in order to create the Franken mess that would turn into you. God made you purposefully, intelligently, right? He had a design. He had a blueprint. The purpose was, David says, it was already before his eyes. He saw what it was he was making as he was making it, before you were you. The end of verse 16 says, God formed you according to his design, and all the days of your life were already written into history even before those days happened. So that God looked into your eyes before there were eyes. He knew your heart before he formed that heart. Every day of your life, some days that are past and long forgotten, other days that are so far into the future or too dim to imagine, God designed a perfect purpose for each one of those. You grasp what this means about the omnipotence of God, that he made you what you are? He assigned the very purpose for every day of your life, even when you were incomplete. He was at work in your mother's womb, bringing you about to completeness. And when you were born, he did not finish that work. He continued to cause you to grow and to mature. And when you came to adulthood and reached the top of the stature that you were going to have, and for some of us started shrinking back down as we got older, God has still not completed that work. The end goal of God's work in the life of his children is to conform us to the image of his Son, and we are still going through that crafting work. He's not done with us. This should create in us nothing short of this jaw-dropping sense of wonder and awe. In verse 17, God's thoughts, his purposes toward us are precious beyond comprehension and numerous beyond calculation. David says, how great is the sum of God's precious thoughts towards us. He goes on to say, if I tried to count them, there would be more than there are grains of sand. The reality of God's goodness and omnipotence may be something we're prone to sleep on. That as we become insensitive and insensible to it, we forget, but his goodness, his greatness is not, even though it's not always at the forefront of our minds and we become spiritually drowsy, that does not cause him to abandon us. At the end of verse 18, David says, when I am awake, I'm still with you. David may even be speaking about awakening and the resurrection after death that would fit this stanza. Verses 13 through 18 describes God's omnipotence displayed as a personal creator, that every sinew and tendon and joint of your body, every emotion and thought of your soul is made by God. God made that body, though, to last one short lifetime. Your body is going to get you all the way to the finish line God has planned for you. But he also created you as a living soul built for eternity so that even after death, you'll awake and stand before his face. God knows everything. God is everywhere. God can do anything. And then finally, in verses 19 through 24, God will deal with everybody. To be honest, verses 19 through 22 are a little bit uncomfortable for us, and it's kind of a surprising conclusion. This is referred to as an imprecatory psalm, meaning it calls for God's wrath against his enemies. So we get uncomfortable with imprecatory psalms, but let me offer a few thoughts on why this is actually a fitting ending to this psalm of praise. First, you can see in those verses, starting at verse 19, David's focus is on God's enemies, not his own enemies. In the first 18 verses, David is awestruck by this omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent God, and then he encounters and speaks of those who would dare profane this God who is so great, this God who David so loves. What is David's cause for disgust for these enemies? Well, look at the text in verse 19. They're wicked. In verse 20, they speak wickedly against God. At the end of verse 20, they take God's name in vain. In verse 21, they hate God. He goes on in verse 21 to describe they rise up in opposition against God. David pictures himself as so aligned with God that he loves what God loves and hates what God hates. And because these wicked people have made themselves the enemies of God, David counts them as his enemies too. But he's focused on God's enemies, those wicked people who have made themselves God's enemies. Second, David is leaving wrath up to God. Verses 19 through 22 is this expression of what David wishes God would do. It is not the plan for what David intends to do. If David really believes that God is all-knowing and all-present and all-powerful, he knows God does not need his help dealing with these enemies. God knows them completely. They cannot escape his presence, and he will deal with them in his omnipotent power. That's what we're called to remember throughout Scripture, is that God deals the vengeance. It's his. It's God who has every right to command us on how to behave towards the enemies of God. And we've been told to declare the gospel of Jesus Christ to them. And if they trample that gospel underfoot, God is going to deal with it. So David's focused on God's enemies. David is focused on God dealing with God's enemies. And then third, David expects to receive the same judgment that he's calling down on God's enemies. Listen closely here. Verses 19 through 22, David calls for God's attention on the wickedness around him. In verses 23 and 24, David calls for God's attention on the wickedness within him. Don't forget, when God deals with everybody, everybody includes you. Verse 23, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties. And see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Know my anxieties. Man, ain't that the truth? These anxieties are disquieting thoughts of life. The reality is that they should fade when we have this perspective of a God who knows everything, is everywhere, and can do anything. Why would you worry about issues when you know you have a God who loves you, unless you think that God is ignorant or absent or incompetent? Does that describe your God? He's not ignorant, he's not absent, he's not incompetent. He knows everything, he is everywhere, and he can do anything. David appeals for God to search his heart for these anxieties and for other wicked ways. He asks God to reveal what's in his heart in order to change what's in his heart. I mean, he just used the word wicked for God's enemies, and now he turns it on himself in verse 24 to say, if there's any wicked way in me, change it that I might be led in everlasting life. So I encourage you this morning to pray this and sing this with David. Ask God to open the door of every compartment of your life. Cleanse it from wickedness. Purge it through the sacrifice of his Son. Have your entire life eternally united with him. Stop living as if there is some portion of your life that is closed off to this all-knowing, all-present, all-powerful God, because there's not. His knowledge and his presence and his power are inescapable. So give up compartmentalized Christianity. That is pointless. Serve God everywhere, in every way, with all your ability, because he is everywhere. He knows everything and can give you the ability because he can do anything. Welcome his exploration of every facet of your life to reveal if there is a wicked way in you and to change it, drawing you closer to everlasting life. Okay. Thanks for your attention. I ran long. Big surprise. Y'all stand. We'll be dismissed to Sunday school classes. Jack, would you dismiss us, please?